all of life, we've got this idea that, the next great question can change everything. Well, that question typically sparks an idea.
But somebody's got to kind of fill the gap between big, lofty idea and how are we going to come together as a team to get it done.
When it comes to ideas, is this: your idea is not your identity, but a great idea will help other people find theirs. If I can make sure that my idea is not my identity, but I can put it in a container like these 6 steps, then the process of ideation can help everybody find their identity without being beholden to it.
Well, here we are. The next question.
On the next question.
I have an idea.
Okay.
That's it. I just have an idea.
Oh.
We're talking about ideation today.
Okay. Yeah. One of my favorites.
And the question that goes along with ideation, you have all these tools with shapes, very mysterious black box sort
Very
of
mysterious
thing. And the question that goes along with ideation is, what are the next steps? What does that mean?
So I think, in all of life, we've got this idea that, the next great question can change everything. Well, that question typically sparks an idea. So you think about you and I, both very fortunate to be happily married, not to each other, but to other people. I'm sure our marriage would also be very happy. It would have been very happy.
Could still be happy.
Yeah, it could be. But, married to delightful women who are not the same person either. But the idea at some point was, I wonder if she's single. And then, I wonder what a relationship would be like. But there's always that, we're, I guess, elder millennials. So back in the heyday of dating, it was always like, I'm waiting for the DTR.
Yeah, totally. The kids don't know what that means anymore.
Yeah.
I think...
so pop quiz. So what does DTR mean to you?
Determine the relationship.
Yeah, I guess ours was define the relationship. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. We picked that up in college. And I shared with my wife once, where I was like talking about a friend that I had fallen out with. Like, we were talking about this earlier this morning with a group of guys, how men, as they get older, maybe people in general, but men especially, like you've got these great friends from high school, college, whatever, you're at each other's weddings. And then at some point you kind of drift apart. Maybe it's busyness, maybe it's, stages of life or lifestyle. Like at a certain point, you don't really know where you stand with an old friend, I think. And I said to him, I was like, I need to have, like, I know it sounds a little silly, but I need to have a DTR with this friend and like figure out, like, are we friends that like connect once every 6 months and that's just what it is? Or are we texting each other every week and trying to get our families together once a year? Like, what kind of friends are we? And she's like, what does DTR mean? And I was like,
I don't know if we can even be married anymore to have a DTR. And I think what's so true about that in all facets of life is you're wondering what's the next step, right? We've been together, we've been hanging out, we've been doing a thing. Like, do you want as much from this as I want? Do I want as much as this as you want? And it's so eerily similar with ideas, because what'll happen is somebody goes, there's a problem. And if you are naturally an ideator, before you even know what you're doing, you're like, you could do this or this or this or this. You're creating a possible new reality with possible solutions. And what I've found, at least in the place where humans occupy the most time, which is at work, which is where I, consult most, is in the workplace and marketplace, is they have problems all the time. And there's this huge tension between an idea person and an implementation person, because they don't know, well, what are the next steps? So you'll have an idea person who will just walk into a meeting, me, the chief of sinners when it comes to this, and somebody's got a problem and be like, well, we could do this, well, we could do this, and we could do this. And it's very funny. About, 7-8 years ago, I had my chief operating person comes into my office after a meeting.
COP.
Well, yeah, I guess they were the director of operations. So everybody's got an acronym for everything, right? So, but she was the person who got everything done. Like, so if I had an idea, she got it done. And so we had just finished up like an hour-long meeting, and I was feeling good about life. And she goes, hey, can we talk? And I had an open door policy, come in anytime you want. But this is one of the smartest people I've ever worked with. Used to be like high up at Kubota, like knew how to get stuff done. So when she asked for time, I was like, we're going to get some stuff done, which I liked. I said, yeah, come on in. She closes the door and I'm like, doesn't ever close the door. I was like, everything good? She's like, yeah, I've got to talk really honestly with you. I said, shoot, you wore everybody in that meeting out.
Oh.
And I was like, oh no. And I love this person. So she could say anything to me and she knew I was going to lean in. So we have that kind of a relationship even still, even though we don't work together anymore. And I was like, what did I do? And she's like, you gave 8 ideas in the course of 40 minutes and then walked out. And I was like, yeah, the meeting was over. She's like, but what you did to 4 of the people in that room is they didn't know, were those like things I have to do immediately? And I went, oh, in my idea, just here are possibilities of the future we could create with these 8 possible solutions. And what they heard is, here are things I'm telling you should be done the next time we see each other. And neither of us knew the next steps.
Right.
And this actually culminated recently in almost all ideas should be cataloged or communicated as maybes, not mandates. And if both people can do this, it gives this very curious experimental feel on an idea where the idea person is not afraid of being shot down and the implementation person isn't afraid of being worn out.
There's definitely, I mean, I think of it like, I think of it through the lens of maybe Les McEwen's work. He's got a great book called The Synergist, and that book opens with a scene where the CEO comes into this meeting 15 minutes late. He's on his phone the whole time, and then he like barks out some random ideas and then leaves 10 minutes before the meeting's over.
That meeting.
Yeah,
for sure. I've accidentally been that guy in that meeting.
Yeah, it's a brilliant story because everybody's been in a meeting like that. They've been somebody in that room. There's the visionary, which in this case was the CEO, person who can see something that the rest of the room and team cannot actually envision. Then there are the process people who are typically the ones who have to figure out what are the steps to getting this done. And then there's another word, they're like the implementers. I can't remember the term he uses, but the people who actually get it done. And then in any team, there's one of those 3 people. And the problem with those 3 people is they don't communicate with each other very well, meaning visionaries can't really communicate well with process people, and implementers are just doing stuff all the time. And so you need kind of a 4th person who's the synergist who steps in and kind of brings all these pieces together. But I work with a processor, and anytime I throw out an idea, she takes it as a to-do. And so we always have to leave like 5 to 10 minutes of buffer at the end of a meeting where I go, hey, based on what I shared with you, like, what do you need help with? And she usually needs, like, what are the next steps? Break it down step by step. And if you give me the process, I'll complete it. Now, I, as a visionary, don't think that way. I go, here's me. Here's the end point. I will get there. And it may not be efficient and it may not be pretty.
Looks like that squiggly graph.
Yeah, but I will get there. And I actually, it's a discipline for me to think, step by step by step by step. And I think people, if you're an idea person, ideas are just possibilities. They're sort of like questions in disguise almost, like,
what if this could work?
Yeah, right? Yeah. Like, wouldn't it be cool?
How fun would this be? Yeah.
If we did this. And I remember working with somebody who was more of a visionary than me years ago. This person was on my team. I was working as a marketing director at a nonprofit when we met. And this guy on the team just wanted to be an idea person. And he just thought like that was a job. And I think it can be a job, but it wasn't a job in our organization.
At a small nonprofit.
Yeah, I sat him down. I was like, hey, man, like, I'm going to need you to like do some of these ideas too. Yeah. Because he literally just wanted to live in idea land his whole day and then like have other people do them. And I love that. And usually
a lot of people might love that. Just say things and you get it done. Yeah. That's that.
And but somebody's got to kind of fill the gap between big lofty idea and how are we going to come together as a team to get it done.
And this is kind of the problem I was up against, right? So last 20 years of leadership, there's always a good idea. There's never enough resources and the timeline's always too pressing. So how do you get an idea that might be really great to actually move from imaginary, cross the ether into reality and actually help? And I came across this idea called the 6 thinking caps or 6 thinking hats.
Right.
And so I was trying this idea out, but there wasn't any order to it. It was just like, hey, here are the 6 parts of any good idea. And they listed them out and they said, oh, when you are in this part, you put on the red hat, or you do this, you put on the green hat. And so it was a really interesting idea. But I noticed, for us, at least in my context, it still wasn't getting the results. So I started to play and tweak with the idea a little bit. And what I noticed was idea people would typically get shot down. That was the negative side of bringing a new idea, because you're going to fail. Like, most ideas fail. Most songs fail. Most movies fail. Like, they don't see the light of day. They don't see opening day. They don't see the album. This idea that you had at your team meeting doesn't actually move the needle on profit or product most of the time.
It's just an idea.
It's just an idea, so it gets shot down. And then on the other side of this, your implementation people, that process person that's getting the thing done, they get worn out. So the 2 greatest possibilities are the idea getting shot down or the implementer getting worn out. And so in terms of the 6 steps, I wanted to move those 2 things as far away from each other as possible. And so what I did is I then ordered the tool. And I said, okay, if these are the 6 parts, I want them to go in order. And it became kind of simple after that, because I noticed, well, what do you need after doing something really vulnerable and scary, like bringing something from the imaginary into the possible? You need a little bit of affirmation. So one of the parts of any good idea is benefits. Well, what are the benefits of that? I said, okay, let me tuck that right next to the idea. And then after that, it was like, well, what's the gut reaction to this idea? And then parts 4, 5, and 6 were, what are the facts, which means what is this going to cost? Then it's the process, which is who, what, where, when, how, and what, and why. Yeah. And then the last bit is just, okay, well, what's the caution on this? Where we most naturally go with new ideas is going, well, it won't work because of this, this, and this, and this. You need both those things. You need both the originality of the idea and the reality of the caution, the guardrails, but you can't put the guardrails right next to the jump, or else you never get to take off. And so what I've seen now in the last 5 years of kind of putting those in what I consider the most effective, efficient order, it's been fun to see, both in my own personal life and businesses, the thing work, because I will literally use this process in picking the restaurant for lunch. In the same way that I'll go, what's the budget for this large company in 2025?
Right. I want you to walk through this again.
Yeah.
But I liked that, like, depending on what kind of room you're in, and there are all kinds of rooms to be in, but there is a certain room where person with the idea is immediately met with opposition. Like, that's the next thing. And that's pretty common, I think. Like, I have an idea, and then, well, that could never happen because blank. Right.
Yeah, we've never done it that way, or we've tried something that sounds vaguely similar and it didn't work, so let's not even try that way.
I worked with a like an intense visionary. He was my boss. Lived in ideas all the time. And so in one case, at that same job, I was working with somebody under me who was a visionary, and I was like, dude, you're 25, you don't get to be a professional idea person. You've got to, like, do something with somebody good.
L's, and
you just got to, like, you don't get to, like, sit on high and just dispense the ideas. You're not at that level in your career yet. My boss, however, was like, it's my job to come up with the ideas, and I pay you to implement them. And if you don't implement them, I'm just going to start implementing them, and I'm going to break.
It's going to be really bad.
Yeah. And I do remember once kind of like trying to go up the chain of command and say, hey, it would be really helpful to me if you would kind of, like, break this up into a process instead of just sending me random emails throughout the day. And he was like, yeah, I totally get that. I'm never going to do that. He goes, I'm twice your age, and it's going to be easier for you to adapt to me than it is going to be for me to adapt to you.
Fascinating.
Yeah. Whatever you think about that, it was a good lesson to learn at 27 or however old I was at the time. It was probably about that. And I was like, okay, understood. Got it. It's now my job to translate your ideas into projects.
So you became the synergist in that moment.
Yeah. I mean,
unbeknownst to you.
Yeah. I didn't even know what that meant. But I understood somebody's got to translate these ideas that are coming down from on high into practical application. And I was in a meeting with this boss and then a peer, and and the boss is just like vision, 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 and the peer, the other person in the meeting, she kept going, well, how are we going to do that? And that, like, we don't have a budget for that. Just like,
All caution.
no, all caution, which is at the end of the process, right? And he looked at her at one point, and he looked her right in the eye and he goes, stop saying no.
Mm-hmm.
And she got real quiet. And I saw in that moment, because I worked with this person a long time. I worked with my boss a long time. And I knew that he liked ideas, and he wanted to be in an environment where the ideas could breathe. And he knew that not every idea was going to make it. He didn't, but he wanted to like give it a shot. And I learned in that like pretty innovative environment, one, ideas are basically worthless.
Worthless.
Yeah, people think, oh, like one great idea will change everything. Not really. No, I mean it like it's just an idea, and without action, it stays an idea. And it is really, really hard to implement an idea. And so like you don't really know if an idea is good. You may think it's great, and then you kind of start fumbling through it, and that's where you really get to see what this thing is. So I like the idea of sort of ordering the 6 hats, is it?
Yeah, so I call it now like the 6 steps of an idea, because hats to me, I was like, people don't want to put on hats.
Right. Yeah. Why would you change hats?
Yeah.
You
And I've watched some teams literally go and buy out different colored hats and be like, I was like, you don't need to do that.
No, don't do that.
And I adopt that.
No,
None of your millennial, Gen Z.
Nobody wants to wear a hat. You're going to wear the red hat. Okay, so what are the steps again? So I've got an idea. Now what's the next step?
So the fun thing is, in the next step, you're not allowed to talk first.
Because I had the idea.
You had the idea, and this is different than a pitch meeting. What I see typically in places where it goes wrong, you have a very charismatic leader like you were describing before who said, here's the idea, go do it.
Right.
That's a pitch meeting. That's not an ideation session.
Yeah.
What I'm interested in is ideation, because ideation takes idea to implementation into the real world. And so the difference here is when we go immediately into a benefit, they're not allowed to talk. If you brought the idea to me, you're not allowed to talk first. Because what you want is the rest of the room to go, oh, I see this value or this value or this value. So they're leaning into the idea immediately. Cool. And I'm not relying on the level of your charisma to sell me on why this is good. Because if you haven't told me an idea that actually fixes a problem that we see any value in, then we shouldn't be pitched on the idea. But if you've communicated in 30, 60 seconds, even 5 minutes, hey, this is the idea. And then we go, oh, I think that could be helpful because of this or this or this. The idea needs to stand a little bit at the very beginning in a like great environment on its own merit. And we go, oh, I think that'll help. Like earlier today, I was helping a team it was interesting. They were in Chile, and somebody was in North Africa and California and like Florida. So their team is all over the place. And I was walking them through this ideation tool, and it was this visionary, and he was going, hold on, so I don't talk? It's like, no, they need to hear the value, but you're really good at a 60-second pitch. Like, you're used to doing this all the time. So it gives you that sense of mind of, oh, I need to have it kind of buttoned up. But what we will do, maybe it's more me, because I will just, hey, this idea could work, or this, I haven't really given it any thought. In that moment, there's a little bit of ego that just says, oh yeah, that was my idea. It literally came out of nowhere in the thing, and it's supposed to go do it. I never actually sat with it and go, would this actually survive in the real world? And that's what you want your ideators to do, to actually go, let me sit with this for more than 4 seconds. I don't want the credit. I want the momentum. I want it to actually help. So if they've done that, they can package it in 60 seconds. And then the value of the idea, for them, it was like, let's start this podcast because they need to connect more with these certain people. So it actually started to solve a problem. And so I asked the rest of the room, the implementers, hey, what value, what's the benefit of this? And they were like, oh, easily we could see it gets in touch with more people. It creates some evergreen content. People understand our brand more clearly. So they were very apt to bring the benefit. But then the ideator can go last. If there's any benefit that we didn't catch in the room, then he's allowed or she's allowed to add it last. So that's step number 2, is making sure there's a benefit.
So step 1 is the idea.
Mm-hmm.
Step 2 is, once I've spent 60 seconds going, here's my idea, guys, it'll change everything. Trust me.
Trust me.
Then you be quiet, and then you let everybody else in the room share potential benefits to that idea. And then you, as the person who presented the idea, can go last and go, here's some other things I think. When you're running a meeting like this, I mean, is the visionary also running the meeting?
In an ideal situation, no. You have a facilitator, implementation person who doesn't. There are in all organizations people who are slightly ambidextrous, and actually most of them are probably somewhere in the middle, because there are 230,000 people companies, but those are rare, right? Those are General Electrics, where they're highly specialized. In most departments, you're doing a little bit of everything, so you're having to come up with creative solutions, you're having to implement those things. So you want to find the person in the room who has a very high EQ and who conflict does not bother them, the tension of this doesn't bother them, and they can help structure it and then value both the idea and the implementation people.
Generally speaking, I mean, maybe this is not your experience, but it seems like, often the visionaries coming in with a not superly a super well-shaped idea.
There you go.
And so for them to have to like immediately defend it kind of puts them in I think it's kind of tough on their ego,
100%. And now you have a tug of war of wills or a personality and personal capital. Yeah, you're so powerful in that room. What am I really going to say to you?
Right.
Yeah. Kind of like your experience. I'm older, you're younger.
No.
Stop saying no and just acquiesce to my way of doing things.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, for sure. That's what happened.
Which, by the way, in that moment, it's just a pitch meeting. I'm pitching you something you will do. This is not an ideation session. They're different.
Got it. So benefits, and then that's step 2. Step 3 is what?
So now we go into the last section of the EQ. So the first 3 steps are all emotional intelligence. The last 3 steps are IQ. So the last step of the emotional intelligence, the third one, is now gut reaction. And what you're wanting to do in this moment is just get a read of the room. I've given the idea, we've heard some benefits, and kind of like the old gladiator movies where like they thumbs, up or down, whether the guy in the arena gets to, live or not. What you want to do in this moment is just get a read of the room. So you count to 3 and everybody goes thumbs up, sideways, or down. 2 rules for this particular section. Nobody's allowed to talk. And you have to define what thumbs up, sideways, and down means before every vote. And what it typically means is, I might be interested, I'm unsure, I might be uninterested. But you want to use those qualifying words, might. Because again, we're in the emotional stage. We're not committing to anything. It's just like, I'm trying to get a sense of how I feel. I might only be 8 minutes into hearing this idea for the first time. And especially for implementers, there's this fear of if I say yes, you're going to make me do something. And I'm already 6 other ideas deep.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. They don't say that. That's just what these things signify.
Yeah, to the room. So then you go 1, 2, 3, and then everybody goes, or.
And that's step 3.
That's step 3. And the necessity of that is just for the ideator and the facilitator to go, does this have legs? If everybody in the room does this, it is one of 2 things. Either the idea was so poorly communicated, we don't know what we are being asked about, or it's so disconnected from the real problem that we're trying to solve. Why would we pursue this? So if you're saying, hey, I'm about to release my next New York Times bestseller book, which, is always on the horizon for you. And then I, as your friend, came and said, hey, my idea is I want to donate $1 million to a charity on the other side of the world. You're like, I think that's fantastic. I came to you asking, how can you help me get this book on the New York Times bestseller? It does not fix the problem this meeting is. That fixes another great problem. I think we should talk about that, but not for helping me with the thing I came into this room to ask you about.
Idea, benefit, gut reaction. Everybody does this. That takes 30 seconds. And what happens?
So now we move into the data IQ portion of the tool. So the next thing is facts. So, okay. The other thing that we're talking about here, right, with most ideation is no pre-thought has gone into this. It's just, we're just reactionary. You guys pick out, see whatever. So now the job is, facts is synonymous with cost. And cost have 3 versions. It's either time, energy, or capital. And even capital has 2 subsects. It's either human capital or money.
Right.
So now you're going to ask the question of, hey, around this idea, how much time could it take to execute? How much energy is required, meaning how many hours from these different departments will be required to execute the idea? And then third, which humans are needed to do that and how much money is involved in that? So it's humans, software, money. There's some capital expenditure on the idea that we just need to know what will it cost. So, if you and I were chit-chatting about a new book and you're like, okay, it'll probably take me time-wise 6 months to write. Energy, it's about something really interesting. And, new books cost $150,000. Come and do. Okay, now I immediately know if your new idea is come write a book with Jeff, I know exactly what the facts are, the cost of doing this thing. But a lot of times with new ideas, they're still in this gelatinous form because nobody's done any of the pre-work. So we're like, let's just keep on having meetings about this, but we have
Right.
no idea what the facts are.
So how do you do that in a meeting where you're hearing this for the first time?
So the best thing, and the most important meeting is the meeting before the meeting and the meeting after the meeting. So when it comes to properly run ideation sessions, what I like is for the ideator to go, hey, I have this possible idea. I'm thinking through some of these so that everybody else in the room is prepped, so that they can ask some questions that the ideator should be thinking about. Hey, have you thought about how many people you need to execute that? Okay, so they're coming with some facts. Hey, have you thought about... So you can do it in the room, but the way it's really, really good is if there's a little bit of pre-work done on the idea.
So ideally, the ideator lets everybody know. They put it on the agenda. They go, I want to pitch this idea.
Or I want to ideate this idea.
I
want
want
to
to
pitch
ideate
it.
this
Yeah,
idea.
there you go.
And, here's what I know.
Yep.
And then when it comes to the facts section of the session, does the ideator go first? Are they the ones going,
Yeah,
here's
that's
the
that
facts?
pre-work coming in there. And then they can say, hey, I think this is a range. I don't have a really clear sense yet because I'm still wanting to see if you guys think this is a good idea, but I'm just going to give you some sort of parameters. But if they go, it could be $5 or 50 million. It could be one person or 100 people. Like, that's not helpful.
And so if it's not helpful, like what? Is meeting over, come back with more facts? Or
Yeah, the facilitator in that moment should say, hey, I really think this has value. But a good idea, like you said, they're a dime a dozen. If we're actually going to get this into the real world, I'd love to pause right here and say, hey, could we schedule this again in a day, a week, a month, a quarter, whatever the size of the idea requires? And could you go and find those figures? Hey, could I assign somebody from the implementation process side of the company to help you go find that? And then we come back and do this. And then that's where the idea should pause, hypothetically, if they have no frame of reference, if there's no handhold. But the danger on that is you also have to be really clear. It's like, you're not going to know down to the penny, down to the hour, down to the people what you need.
So if that happens, that ideation session is over at that point. Okay.
Yeah.
Assuming that they've done some homework, they bring some facts. Are they the only one who shares facts, or can other people contribute?
Other people can contribute if it's like a larger, group thing, but then it really moves now into when you start having groupthink into step 5, which is process.
Okay.
Process is your 5 questions from, journalism. It's that who, what, where, when, how. So the questions we're asking about any event is the same question we're asking about an idea. Who is going to be in charge of this? What is it trying to accomplish? Who, what, where are we hoping that this thing lives? When, what's the timeline of this thing accomplished? And how are we actually executing it? There are things that feel vague. And then my favorite joke around this is who, what, where, when, how, and sometimes why. Because just like the vowels, that's actually sometimes the most critical one, because a word breaks down, doesn't make sense without a Y at the end of it. In the same way, at the end of step 5, if we're not kind of reiterating, hey, is this really fixing a problem? Why would we do this? And let's just make crystal clear that this idea, this solution fixes that problem. If we don't have that, there's a real problem, because now all of a sudden we'll do what I call climbing the ladder on the wrong wall. You'll finish, you'll have a great idea session, everybody will say, yes, we'll go execute it for 6 months, and we'll look around and be like, why doesn't this feel any better? Well, the front of the house was on fire, and we said yes to doing the landscaping in the backyard. Oh, okay. Yeah, we didn't know why we were doing this. We were fixing the wrong problem.
So during the process section, who is asking and answering who, what, where, when?
Yeah, this now becomes groupthink. Now you want all of the acumen, all of the thinking of your process people, because they're really jumping in even before that in 4 and going, hey, I think this could be... Now your ideator has to come with some of those costs, but they're able to also say, hey, historically, because your idea person is not going to know that sort of detail, hey, I think this might be true if that's helpful. And they're like, oh, great, that gives me a handle on that. So it's very collaborative. 5 is easily the most collaborative section of this whole thing, where we really want to go, hey, based on our current resources, this is the who, this is the when, this is the where, this is the how.
So the ideator comes with some facts, and then that kind of segues into the process section, where people just start asking questions and sharing. When is this going to happen? How is this going to happen? And this is a group discussion.
Yep. And then that naturally just goes into that why question now leads into step 6.
Okay.
Should we do this? Is this something that,
question.
yeah, that's the question now in step 6, which is caution. And here's my favorite kind of other mechanism in the tool is in step 2 during benefits, the ideator speaks when? Last. So now in caution, the ideator speaks when? First. And so I'm interested from you, diving into the tool, why do you think that's important?
Well, I mean, if I bring an idea, right? I think if you're an idea person, you don't know if it's a good idea or not.
Mm,
You just know it's an idea and it might have a charge. I think
such a good word.
idea people, visionaries, assess ideas based on emotion.
Yeah.
Like
The
how
electricity
excited,
of,
yeah, how excited do I feel about it?
Yeah.
And if it feels really alive to me, typically you get an idea and then you sort of see it confirmed in the world. You see it confirmed on the news, you see it confirmed in conversations with friends. It's hard to be a visionary because it feels like you're always operating in urgency. And it really does feel, I think this is true. It feels to the person who has the idea, it feels like if we don't do this now, it's never going to get done. There really is, it is kind of this binary ADD, thing. And I've often heard, people who have ADD, ADHD, neurodivergence, there's a certain group of people, in the population, like if they don't see it, it doesn't exist. And if it's on their desk, it has to exist. Like that's the only way it exists. A friend of mine who's a very successful entrepreneur, diagnosed with ADD, she says like, my husband will like clean up my papers. I have piles everywhere and I'll clean them up and I'll forget about things. She goes, he doesn't understand that for me, these piles are reminders of things that need to get done. And I was like, yes, that's true. That's true for me. My wife was a very clean person and she's like always putting things away. And for me, that's just a signal to finish this thing. But I think if you're going through this process, if I brought an idea to a meeting and I've submitted it to this process and we are intentionally and also carefully kind of beating up this idea a little bit, pressure testing it to see if it is worth pursuing, I'll have a pretty good sense as to whether or not like I think it's worth it by the end of that process. And if I go, nah, like I don't think we should do this.
Yeah.
Like it sounds like too much of a hassle. I don't want to divert resources to it. I didn't actually understand what the cost was. I think idea people, if they're the leader or they have some sort of influence, they don't know how much they're burdening their team.
Yeah, 100%.
With a new idea.
Yeah. And I think the beauty of what you bring up there at the end is it may not even be something as large as I don't think the whole idea isn't worth doing. What I see more often is if the leader can lead with a caution first, they're taking one shot at a battleship and it's just putting one little ping in the dent. But what it signals to the rest of the team is this isn't from God's mouth to our ears. She also sees a problem. They see something as an issue here.
Right.
And what that does in like the mentality and the culture of your process people is it makes them lean in. They're like, oh, you see a little bit of what I see. Like you see the value in me going, but wait, what about this or this or this? And so the beauty of to me of the leader going first in step 6 in this caution piece is it just unifies the team. In the same way for benefits, when they all go first, the leader, the visionary goes, oh, you see me. When the leader takes the first shot at the idea, they all go, oh, you see us.
Yeah, I never really thought about that.
Mm-hmm.
There is this sense, I think, when you're bringing an idea to a table, that like he must have thought all of this through. She must have thought all of this through. Now we have to figure out how to do it, and they're not gonna help us do this. So I love the idea of like bring everybody together. Let's really kind of work with this thing and see if this is something we all agree that we should work on. So the leader or the visionary ideator goes first. They kind of throw up the cautions. Should we do this? And then everybody goes after that. And is it a discussion? Is it thumbs up, thumbs down? How does that work?
Yeah. So now it's just a discussion. Now you're saying, hey, now the floor is open. in the world in which this thing were actually going to exist. If we said we're going to leave this meeting with some action steps, what are like blind spots? Where are the potholes? Where are the things you're like a little bit worried, like, hey, it might derail our beautiful new vehicle that we've just put on the road? So we love to hear from everybody in the room because, by the way, we think that this sort of critical thinking, not being critical, but critical thinking, only helps the idea. It only makes it stronger and bigger and better and more efficient. And so it really does become a conversation and collaboration at that point.
And then what? Like, how does the meeting end?
So when you wrap it up, the facilitator basically says, okay, this was the idea. Here's some of the benefits. Here's our kind of gut reaction. They're doing a little 30-second recap. Here's some of the facts and the process. So what I'd like to do now, with everybody's permission, is I'd like to like pause and go, are we good now for us to start assigning this out for next steps? And what I like about this is it's going, there's continuity.
Yeah.
We're all a part of it. There's also some momentum, so this wasn't wasted. I mean,
Right.
we live in a culture now where, our most popular meme is this meeting could have been an email.
Right.
And my contention with that is, yes, your garbage meeting should have been an email.
Right.
But a great meeting is literally unmissable.
Yeah, agree.
Like, you're in there, you feel valuable,
For
there's
sure.
momentum and energy. And so the role of the facilitator, and that can be anybody in the room. In small organizations, that could be the idea person, or it could be the chief implementation person. With the only 3 of you, you just pick a role and be like, okay, at the end of this, I'm going to put a bow on it. And what I always want in a win is there has to be a number and a deadline. All wins, whether it's the smallest game of tic-tac-toe or a World Cup with 64 countries coming from all over the planet, there has to be a number. I have to score 1 more goal than you by when? By the end of the 90 minutes. So there's number and duration. And so at the end of it, the facilitator's goal is to go, hey, what's a number? Okay, we need to have this one meeting by this next Wednesday to have assigned these people. And you're clearly stating that to the room, that there will be a win from this ideation session, even to the point of, we don't really know what's next, but hey, just so you know, the ideator will meet with one other person to have a follow-up meeting and send a recap email by the end of day on Wednesday, and then we'll tell you what's happening next.
There's a next step.
There's always a next step, because like we said at the beginning, the chief question is, what's the next step? And so in order to increase clarity and connection, you have to reduce ambiguity, which creates anxiety. And everybody's got this question, was this worth it? Did I give my time to something? What is the next step? And this now is reducing all of that anxiety by giving that clarity.
Yeah, well, I mean, it also sucks to be in a meeting where, like, you have this brilliant idea and everybody goes, awesome, we're all on board with this. Now what do we do? Or, we'll talk about it later.
Oh, the worst.
And I think that happens often.
A lot.
Yeah.
And the opposite side of that, so you come from the ideation session, I had a brilliant session. There's just the other side of that where we had a lackluster idea, but I polished this turd. Like, holy crap, like, I know the facts and the figures and the next step. And then the ideator kind of goes, I don't really like that anymore because it's not really what I thought. Okay, we'll talk about it later. So you just suck the wind out of all of the implementation people in the room as well.
Right.
So there needs to be a clear bow and clear next steps, even if that's happened, of going, I don't know if this is the right idea anymore. Me and so will meet and we'll send out an email by end of day on this day. So there's real clarity that, oh, okay, maybe it morphed into something different, but there's still going to be a next step.
I think that's important because if you have, say, a visionary leader in an organization and there is no follow-up, there's just lots of ideas, some of which get done, a lot of which don't. My experience was working in an organization like that when I came to this nonprofit that I worked at for many years is there was this feeling of disillusion on the staff where they're like, oh, it's another idea.
Yep.
Like, cool.
Yeah, I guess I'll be there. I'm not paying any attention because this will be like the dozen that came before them.
And I didn't know anything. I was like 25 years old at the time, and I was excited. I'm a part of this growing organization. We're doing lots of fun things. But everybody's like, this is just so and so's new idea. It'll be over in a year or two. You're just his new pet project.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw that. And what was crazy is the idea did take off. It did become this big thing, and they were all wrong.
Sure.
But what I saw was kind of a failure to like bring the team on board with this big new vision.
And sometimes that success is more dangerous than the failure, because now all of a sudden it's just the success of the visionary and nobody else feels any attachment or worth or value or collaboration to the thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of overdone to, give a Steve Jobs example, but here we are, there were 2 different Steve Jobses. There was the radical visionary, from the 70s and 80s, we're going to change the world. And then there was the older, wiser man who actually learned how to work with a team, worked at Next Computer, which was basically a failure. But they eventually created the operating system we now still have today with all Apple products. And then Pixar, where he actually learned how to be a CEO and had to get people on board with ideas and get others to adopt those ideas and take them somewhere. The Apple of 1980 versus the Apple of 2024 are completely different organizations. And I think that's a result of two different kinds of visionary leadership, not one lacking in vision and the other one having a lot of vision, but you want to have a vision that invites people on board with that vision. They can help turn it into something.
And I think you bring up an interesting point too there. The difference between Apple and Pixar is, now at least, Apple is still an interesting technology company, maybe.
Yeah.
Unless you're a Samsung person, you're like, they haven't been interesting for 20 years. Yeah, maybe you're right. But Pixar is this universally like, oh, you just feel warm and fuzzy, you feel included, you can see yourself there. And I think that's the last great thing that I think people need to think about. The last great thing that I think people need to think about when it comes to ideas is this: your idea is not your identity, but a great idea will help other people find theirs. And what I mean by this is when you walk in as a visionary and you say, hey, this is the idea, a lot of people are so attached to this. I remember this as a songwriter years ago. I was doing a co-write with a guy who had written like legitimate #1 hit singles in the country world. And he was like, Carl, nice to meet you. Like our, labels had set up this like kind of songwriting date. That's how it worked in those days. Maybe it still works like that. And I was like, man, I'm so honored to be here. He's like, yeah, man, show me the, couple songs you're excited about. And so we played a couple and he's like, oh, I really like that. And then he played me some and I'm like, no, those are songs. Like, wow, geez, okay, you're a real craftsman. And we kind of stopped for our little, coffee lunch break or whatever. And he says, so, how many songs you got in the catalog? And I was like, man, 40. And I was like really excited.
So these are songs that you've written that have been published.
Yeah, songs that are finished that are maybe on a record or about to go through and be published. And I didn't have a publishing deal at the time. I was like super on the label, but just, off on myself. I was like, how about you? He's like, I think I'm about to 6,000.
Wow.
And I was like, man. And I was like, can you help? Like, what piece of advice would you give me? He's like, they're not babies. Like, your song is not a baby. You're going to have 1,000 little song idea babies over your life. The less precious you can be with them, the less attached. He's like, they're great. It's a moment of inspiration that hopefully makes its way out into the world. But the more attached you are to it and the more it becomes about you and about your identity, the less able you are to have somebody else write a different bridge or co-write with people or write hundreds of or thousands of them that eventually get out into the kind of the ether of the culture. And I think that same idea is so very true of our ideas inside companies or anywhere. If I can make sure that my idea is not my identity, but I can put it in a container like these 6 steps, then the process of ideation can help everybody find their identity without being beholden to it. Oh, I'm an idea person. I don't need to feel bad about that. I can bring it, but I need to bring it with a little bit more acumen and understanding how it lives in the real world. Oh, I'm an implementation person. I don't need to feel bad that people have accused me of being critical. I need to have a critical eye and idea towards the thing to help it be better, but I can find that part of my identity in the process.
Well, that's all I got on that.
Me too.
Until the next question.